June 2021, and again, can I pass on to you a very happy new year, financial new year, for midnight tonight. I'll now call the meeting open at 2 p.m. And we do have one request for a leave of absence. You're right, Bill. One request for a leave of absence from Councillor Potter, who's away seeking some officer in the dock. So I'll move that that be accepted. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Duff. Those in favour? Carried unanimously, and we look forward to Councillor Potter joining us shortly. We did conduct the recognition of the traditional owners this morning at the general meeting, item 3. So we'll move on to declarations of any conflicts of interest in relation to the items in the agenda today. Do we have any disclosures in relation to such? No? Okay. We'll keep moving on. 5.1, minutes of the Budget Committee meeting held on the 16th of June 2021 can be found at page 5. I'll hereby move that those minutes be received. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Henshin. Any comments, questions, concerns from committee members? No? Councillors? Okay, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda, 6.1, is the final draft operational and capital budget for 2021-2022. I thought what we'd do is we'll just we might hand over to Mr. CEO and our General Manager and Finance team to present such, give us an introduction into such, and then give councillors the opportunity to perhaps ask questions, have a discussion about it. A little bit more flexibility with committee meetings than ordinary meetings, so we can have a conversation about it and then look to resolve the recommendation at the end, I think, Mr. CEO. So we'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll go very briefly, and the finance team put through the talk on the budget. The budget document is handed out as to all councillors today for the 2 weeks prior to the special budget meeting. The reports, there is no request or recommendations today to resolve, receive or do anything with it. It literally is being handed over so the councillors have the full 2 weeks prior to the budget meeting. The budget agenda itself, the agenda paperwork, I went through the first draft of the budget agenda for the 14th, is fairly much done. I would acknowledge certainly the finance team and all the ones who have done the reports have got that into the system. We've been way ahead on policies and fees and charges and that side of it. It's been all good. So it'll be the statutory resolutions as well as, the statutory resolutions as well as the budget itself will be presented to the meeting on the 14th. We just put in the background today, this meeting is actually a little bit symbolic in one way. It's the end of it's the sunset clause for the budget committee. So Mayor, certainly when he raised it, the resolution was that it ran from April to 30 June, so this is the last of the Budget Standing Committee reports. It's been an interesting, it's certainly as a process, I think I've said before, I've never been involved in a council that's run a budget committee as such, and we've learned a lot out of it, and should council resolve to do the same next year. I think after we found out a couple of different ways of running the process and doing the discussion, certainly with the committee recommendations back as far as setting the parameters, as far as the framework, and again, got the thinking caps on for how to make it better next year. It gives that little bit of direction about so we can go and these are the assumptions and we can go off and then work with the documentation. So I'd just like to thank everyone. It's actually been as old and grey was being thrown around earlier in the day you certainly learn something new every year, and this has been my first time through my local government life having a formalised budget committee, and certainly have learned a bit out of it and looking forward to making next year's process even better. So thanks, Mayor, and I'll just throw to the finance team if that's okay.
Thanks very much, Mr. CEO, and thank you for your support of council in providing us with a what I think's been quite a successful framework for the operation of these budget committee meetings. First time round, we've learned a lot, and we'll no doubt be better for it next time round. So thank you again. The General Manager Jarvis and Finance Manager, we'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to reiterate to the council the words here of our CEO that in my 25 years, nearly 26 years within local government, I have never been through such a stringent process or budget process. We've really peeled everything open and reviewed everything, and we've made as many cuts as what we possibly can. And I think that I'd like to thank this council for your support there and asking those difficult questions and really challenging me and my team to deliver the best possible outcome we can for the council and also for the community. So I'd also like to take the opportunity there to acknowledge my very qualified and my team, my finance team. We have 7 qualified accountants within the finance team, and I would say we've got a very, very strong contingency of professionals there, and they deliver. I've had staff working here till 11:30 at night balancing balance sheets and budgets, and I just want to recognise the staff, Selena and Kerry and Max and all of our finance team for their contributions as well. So as an outcome of all of what we've progressed through, this is a draft budget that we are presenting to you. It's captured all of the resolutions and recommendations that council has put towards us. I believe it is a very responsible and achievable budget. It's very, very tight, and I'm just looking forward to the first quarter review to see how we're tracking there after the adoption of this budget. So I will let Selena speak to the budget. We have actually, just the bottom line there is that we have reined the budget in there. We're looking there for a 3.1 mil deficit. Last year, our original budget was 3.675 mil deficit, and after the first quarter, it increased to a 4.560 deficit. And I'm very proud to say that we've reined that back in. It looks like after the first quarter review this year, we've reined that back to a $3.207 million deficit. So it's about a 1.3 that we've reined that the current budget back. So again, I'd like to acknowledge council and also the managers and GMs and the whole of the South Burnett team, because everyone's worked very, very hard and really, they've been punching above their weight and carrying a heavy load to bring in that result. So with having said that, I'll hand it to Selena, and Selena can talk you through the intricacies of our budget, our capital and our operational budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. This budget has been put together with all the assumptions that have been put through the Budget Committee. I think what I'll do, rather than walk through each part of this budget, I'll let you guys have a read of it. However, I might just touch on our ratios because that's our long-term forecast, and just talk a little bit about how we're tracking long-term with the current assumptions that we've got. So if you have a look at page 13 for your asset sustainability ratio, you'll see on average we're well and truly hitting our 90% target for the asset sustainability ratio over the long term. It does drop down below the 90% in a couple of the years, but that's when we don't have as much money in the buildings that we're spending, that there is available for them to spend that they're not putting in there yet. But on average over the 10 years, it is trending really well. So that's the first one of our ratios. Your second one, your net financial liabilities ratio, which is on page 14, you'll see that we drop down below the lower target in the outer years. Now that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's actually where we're starting. Most of our loans were to be paid out in about 10 years. So that's where your loans are starting to drop away. And so that is putting us in a better position. And then for your operating surplus ratio, you can see where we're coming back into surplus, and then we just build year on year. Now, the reason that's hitting that upper target in the outer years is because that's where we're starting to try and build as much in our income statement as possible to fund your water and your tip. So you're getting these big income surpluses in the outer years that we're putting away to fund them. So I guess the picture that the net financial liabilities ratio and your operating surplus ratio is showing that there is ability there to borrow in those outer years, because you'll see that we're dropping down lower and then we're going higher in the, we're nearly getting to where you would want to maximise for your surpluses. So, yeah, I just thought it was interesting to see the two of them together and where it's tracking, and that there is potential to look at. I'd be interested to see this time next year when we're sitting here having a look at it, how it's trending, and whether or not we should be looking at borrowing in those outer years rather than just keep putting our rates up so high. So just something else to consider when we're modelling next year. Which one? Sorry.
Sorry, Ms. Smith, through you, do you want us to touch on the rates there as well?
If we could have a summary of the rates changes. Yes, thank you.
So the general rate was 1% on the rate in the dollar across the categories. Now, the only exception to that was your solar farms, and that was because we brought the rate in the dollar back to be what the wind farm rate in the dollar was, which was discussed in our last meeting. Other than that, the rest of them are at the 1% in the rate in the dollar. Your waste management levy was up the $2 to $164.50. Your community rescue and evacuation levy never changed. The rural fire levy didn't change. There was movement in the quarry charges, but that's based off the overall implementation plan. Your domestic went to 179 for your, and your commercial, went to your 250, but that was including the state waste levy. And for Bunya Mountains, it landed at the $216. For our sewage charges, the first pedestal remained the same. Your additional pedestal went to $229, so that was a nearly 11% increase. Your vacant went to $533, which was about a 3% increase. For Proston CED scheme, now when we looked at the additional pedestals and went from 28 to 31%, Proston was already on 31%, so there's been no change in their fees. It's just brought the others up to be in line with them. So they remain the same at the $436 for the first pedestal and $136 for the additional. And the vacant did get the 3% increase, which took it up to about $91. For the water access charges, they went up on average of 5%. And same with your consumption, they also went up to 5%. That was across the board, and then it was 6% into the outer years. And the only other one that was different to that was your high volume commercial, which went up by the CPI. So that was there were the resolutions that were put through from the Budget Committee that were built into this budget document.
Thank you, Salita. So, Salita, just in summary, general rate 1% increase. Waste management levy has gone up by $2 from 163 to 165, and that applies to all rateable properties. Wheelie bin collection for residential has gone from 168 to 179, so an extra $11 per year there. Sewerage, first pedestal remains at $739, and of course, residential homes don't pay for the second pedestal, but the second pedestal for certain categories goes up from 207 to 229, which is an 11% increase or $22 increase. The access for water, you said 5%. What's our current water access fee, and what will that go to? Have you got that number there?
You're talking about a 20 mil metre?
Say a 20 mil as the starting point.
It was $624 and it'd go up to $656.
624 to 656, so $32 increase there. And consumption goes from, for the first 200 kilolitres, from $1.57 to $1.65.
Yep.
Okay. And high value consumption is CPI increase only, which I think we said was about 1.1%. Would that be correct?
It went from the...
For large commercial?
Yeah, it went from the $1.71 to $1.73.
$1.73, so a small increase there. Okay.
Yep.
So both tiers up up
Yep.
on that high volume consumption for those large industrial users. Okay. I suppose, councillors, any questions on what we've received so far? Questions, comments? Not at this stage. Councillor Duff.
Oh, yeah, I just a question, it's just to Selena, just wanting to know, the commercial land in Mergen is $5.17, and it's going up to 5.22. It seems to be like way higher than any of the other commercial land, and I guess that's to do with the valuations, but it seems to be excessive. I just wanted to check that figure. It's on page 85. Yeah, I guess, excuse me, through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess the question is, it was excessive last year, so it seems to be, you know, it's way higher than the others. I'm just wanting an explanation, that's all.
Look, I would have to take that on notice and talk to the senior rates officer about the history of why those charges are how they are. If you're questioning last year's charge of the $5,
Yeah,
now we have started workshops on trying to bring the cents and the dollar closer, but that hasn't happened at this point. That's earmarked in the operational plan for the next financial year.
Thank you. I just wanted to check that. I also wanted to flag the fact that, and this is probably a question to the CEO. So throughout this budget process, I had some concerns about different things, and I voted actually against some of the different parts of the budget. Like, for example, we're already raising 2.16 across our overall general rates just because we're averaging out the valuations. And so I voted against the 1% increase. So in adopting this budget, so I'm adopting everything in here, even though some of the stuff I don't actually believe in. So what's the way forward for a councillor who has concerns about some different parts of this budget?
I'm trying to think how best to answer that, councillor. It would be exactly what you've done for the last, how long you've been a councillor. The standing committee, council made it clear as far as its terms of reference that it wanted to have some form of open and structure around it. So the standing committee structure was what was adopted. Councillors vote, and whether it's 7-0, 4-3, 5-2, 6-1, it doesn't really matter. It's a clear vote as per the regulations, as per any other meeting. Once that vote, the committee recommendation is then taken. The information is given, which has been fairly standard practice for myself. It was in the legislation too, for a period of time that 2 weeks you give the draft budget to councillors. When you get to the meeting on the 14th, you can vote and discuss and move what you wish. It's normal practice, so nothing's changed. So if you're uncomfortable with something and you want to, I'll just be flippant, you wanted to put a 20% rate rise on something because then the other 6 councillors said, oh, we should go 15, not 20. You can raise 20, it gets discussed on its own merits and it gets voted up or down. Is that, so because you raised it and you disagreed with it and the vote, council by vote and then minutes has accepted a proposal and the assumptions that we've built into it, the consideration with workshops, decisions aren't to be made in workshops, hence we've ended up in this process. So come to the 14th, go for your life, is best I can answer if I've got your question right.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I guess it was whether it's here we flag it or whether it's at the budget meeting we flag it. I guess that's my question, because we're in accepting this draft budget, Is this where I would raise my concerns, or should I raise them at the actual budget meeting? I guess that's my question.
Look, I think, Councillor, we're having a discussion in relation to the budget, as we always do in our budget committee meetings. You're quite entitled to raise issues or concerns or ask questions here today, but ultimately adoption happens on the 14th of July. So if there's an issue inside the budget that you're particularly concerned about, which gives rise to your unpreparedness to support the budget, then you could consider you could consider voting against it if you felt that that issue was sufficiently significant to do so. But my understanding is, Mr. CEO, that the budget comes down as one resolution when adopted on the 14th of July. Would that be correct?
Yeah, yes, for the actual budget. Have you got that draft report there, Linnell? So the actual budget itself we get into a fair bit of detail. So the budget document itself is set out by the regulations in the Act. So when council adopts the budget, that's what council adopts. So it's a series of financial statements and different bits and pieces, the revenue statement. As part of the budget agenda, there's a whole swag of independent reports, everything from under the legislation, we've got three business units as defined by the regulations or the Act. So and water's come up several times over the last 12 months. Number of water meters triggers a certain threshold for us. We're not at that, so we will recommend, and if council agrees again, resolve not to apply the Code of Competitive Conduct to the water business unit. So there's a whole series of resolutions, rates and charges. There's like the rates that council adopts the land categorisation, and then adopts its rate in the dollar. So that there's an individual, and if it's a rate in the dollar issue, again, I'll use my silly example. You want 20% and someone else wants 15. We've recommended 15 in the document. You go for 20, and again, it's meant to be a far out example. You say, no, I really want 20, so it gets voted up or down 6-1 because everyone else wants 15. It might be that you agree at that point in time, so everyone says, okay, yep, 7-0. So yeah, at the budget, certainly, like the meeting, the floor is the councillors today to discuss what they wish. There is no acceptance today of the budget. It is literally handed over for information. And so the councillors have 2 full clear weeks' notice of understanding what's in it, so that there's an expectation. I have forever had an expectation when you walk into that budget meeting, you understand what you're voting on. So if you don't like a bit of it, you'd be mad not to say.
So in today's part of that opportunity to raise any questions, issues or concerns that you've got, or I'd imagine, Mr. CEO, between now and the 14th of July, there's the opportunity to ask those questions of our General Manager of Finance, come acting CEO over the next 2 weeks in advance of that. So use today or use the next 2 weeks, but certainly take the opportunity to have yourself fully informed before we have that budget meeting on the 14th of July.
Correct, Mayor, and with the questions and things. So I think actually it's an excellent point, Mayor. Any questions that are asked, we won't change the document. So the document now is the document until it hits the budget meeting. Council can at any point change. So again, I'll use my 15, 20% silly example. So if you get to the budget and everyone agrees that 20% is more relevant because of X, Y, Z, the budget's amended. So it's adopted as amended for 20%. And it's just a normal vote. Any of the questions that we receive, my suggestion would be if there's questions come in, so that everyone has equal opportunity, that once the response is sent out as to this is why or this is that, it's circulated to the 3 general managers, myself and all councillors. And then that way everyone's got, it might be the same question that someone else is thinking, so we don't double up on question and answers.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Absolutely. And welcome Councillor Potter to the meeting. We'll note that Councillor Potter's arrived at the meeting at 2:23 p.m. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's great to see this all just come together, I have to say. You know, it's been an incredible couple of months since April. I cannot believe we've been discussing and unpacking this since April, and it's just fantastic to actually see it all come together in one document. So thank you to you and your team. I know you've been here late into the night, and I know you've been as passionate as we have about getting this right for our community. So thank you for your efforts. I have to say this has been one of the most incredibly difficult tasks I have ever done in my career. It's also been, I've enjoyed the challenge. I haven't enjoyed watching our staff sweat to the extent in which we have made them sweat with this budget. But it's been an incredible learning experience, and I just wanted to thank and acknowledge everyone's hard work and the opportunity to be a part of it. I know there's certainly much more work to be done, Councillor Duff. I think through the process we've learned a lot. I think everyone's raised some really valuable points, and I know there's definitely much more work to be done. Really value the time and effort that goes into those first quarterly reviews and the opportunity. You know, this will be a work in progress. Just because we adopt this budget or whatever it is that we adopt on the 14th of July, you know, this will continue. This work doesn't just stop when we adopt the budget, and I think that's really important to acknowledge. I just had one question for now, and I promise you there will be, you all know me well, there'll be plenty more, no doubt, once I unpack this document. It's great to see the graphs and the pie charts and the tables and things throughout the budget document, and I just noticed with the capital works on page 8, really pleasing to see that high proportion of renewal work there. So just probably a question for GM Meehan, just around that. It's my understanding, you know, that's responsible in terms of not impacting on our depreciation. I'm on page 8, the renewals. Just wanted to understand that. We're doing a high proportion of renewal work. If you could just talk to that, that would be great. Otherwise, thank you, team.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. So we had Cody sit with Max last week and run through all the projects. So we do a preliminary estimate of renewal for sustainability. So with the funding that we have, so we're up above, just above 80%. So we're just below the QTC benchmark of around 90%. So it's still fairly good. So to me, my personal opinion reflects a good capital program. We talk a lot about the 90% and we talk about whether it should or shouldn't, what it might be. But the sheer fact is that council's capital programs continue to focus a lot on renewals and replacing with modern equivalents means it's a fairly responsible program, whether it's in roads, water, sewerage, or it's in buildings and whatnot. So, and obviously that takes into account the external funding we receive. So it's quite a, from an asset point of view, to answer council's question, if for me, it's a responsible program. If you're seeing those sort of high numbers, it's great. Considering, I think when you go back a few years, the real numbers we were seeing around the 50s and 60%, so we're up in the 80s. So I think that's great.
Thanks, Councillor. Thanks, General Manager. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Matt. Just a couple of questions in regards to the grants and funding. The bottom line, obviously, we've allocated a certain amount of money through Works for Queensland and LRCI funding. If this budget goes through with that bottom line, the projects, just a question around the projects that we've got or talking about, is there still possibility to move or change projects? Because unfortunately I wasn't at that discussion where we were talking about projects and all that through the Works for Queensland and all that. So just a question on, and you can take it on notice, in regards to the projects that have been discussed. I've got a couple of little ones. There's one out Councillor Duff's way. The reason I'm asking that question at Proston. So if we, I'm aware that there was $2 million or something allocated to the parks and gardens. So are we saying that those projects are locked in and we can't change that, or acknowledging the fact that there's a $2 million spend, can we change that after with this budget process going forward?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so from the funding point of view, we've allocated those in large buckets with the department. So, say in the parks area, that we ended up with the $2 million for those projects. Underneath that, council has the ability to change those projects internally without referring back to the department to get a variation. So it'd be a matter, we could relook at them. We put all of the parks ones over sort of the first 2 years, because the Works for Queensland in that area is a 3-year program. So we've allocated those programs over year 1 and year 2 of these budgets. So there is capacity to to look at, and particularly if we've got internal savings on projects like that, we would reallocate it out. The only issue is, again, the sooner we get the program locked in, the better scoping we can do, and if we've commenced projects and that. So, but yeah, council has the ability to do those internal movements.
Happy with that, Councillor Jones? Yeah, thanks, General Manager. Councillor Schumacher?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Also, just in relation, probably a question in relation to how we'll communicate the budget to our community and make sure they understand the budget, and particularly around the averaging of the land values over the 3 years, because it's clearly stated on page 30, and we're all very aware that we're in the third year of the averaging of the land valuations, and certainly I appreciate we've got a sample. Every council has been given a sample of what that means firsthand for residents, industrial, rural and commercial operators across the region, rural residential operators. So I'm just mindful that valuation will impact everybody differently. Some people will see an increase in their valuation being the final year, and others will see a decrease. And I just wanted to understand how we're going to communicate that to the community, so they understand that process and the decision of the former council to try to alleviate the immediate impact of those large increases in valuations by smoothing that out over the 3 years. So that's probably a question for you, CEO Mark.
Thanks, Councillor. The budget media pack is being drafted pending the finalisation, but the final draft of this document. So it'll be pre-populated, and in my absence, General Manager Jarvis will be working with Coordinator Tracy to have that ready, so it'll be right to go on budget day. So yeah, it hasn't had the numbers loaded into it until this document was handed to you as councillors, but it'll be right to roll as soon as I would expect nearly over the next week, Susan. Yeah.
And probably just a supplementary question for you, Mr. Mayor. You had indicated that you'd be doing a number of videos and things to communicate the budget to our community. So I just wondered where things were at with that.
Yeah, really good questions. Thanks, Councillor Schumacher. I think just a couple of things there. First of all, to the media, if you'd like a copy of this document, I know it's a bit hard to follow down there in the gallery without this in front of you. Just reach out to our CEO and we can organise to get you a copy of that after today's meeting. So that'll be a part of it. But in addition to that, certainly the videos, I'll be keen to get the videos out to the community. And I would, subject to the advice of our CEO, perhaps look to start doing that ASAP before 14 July, so that we can share that with the community if we're able to do so, Mr. CEO. Yeah, so we can start work straight away after today on getting those videos out, and then once the budget's resolved, then we can get those media packs out, get the information out to the community. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that deeper understanding, certainly it's been great to be here and unpack the budget process and go through all of this information to the very finest detail, but I think it's really important, certainly Mr. Mayor, you as the leader of this council, to step up and communicate certainly our intentions and try to encourage our community's understanding, and by all means for members of our community, our local residents and constituents, I think it's important that we're all equipped with the right information so that we're communicating the facts about the budget, and we're certainly busting any myths or misunderstandings in our community. We want to make sure our people fully understand what it is that the work that this council has done, and certainly our intentions with the budget.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Schumacher. And certainly, in those video presentations, I'll be looking to certainly provide the community with a better understanding and explanation around some of those key issues and help bust, as you said, bust some of those myths out there in relation to council's finances and budgeting and our process, and what a whole range of the elements inside the budget mean. And then, of course, once the budget's resolved by council, as we always do, we'll all go out to the community, whether we vote for or against. We'll all go out to the community and support the implementation of the budget. In full respect of the democratic process in the chamber. I'm sure that will be the process that will go down. So, look, I just wanted to make a couple of observations. I suppose I'm just going to probably stand up and give this presentation. So Ken, I also firstly thank the finance staff and the councillors for the work you've all done together in getting the draft budget to this stage. The process has taken several weeks and a number of long meetings going over the budget in great detail. Having said that, I believe there is still a little bit more work to do on the 14th of July in ensuring that we deliver a budget that is financially responsible and will not hinder, but indeed support the growth of our region's economy and population. As such, I will not be supporting this budget in its current format when it comes to Council's special budget meeting rescheduled for the 14th of July. As such, in summary, the primary reasons for taking this position are as follows. One, having studied economics, I'm a firm believer that small and efficient government is a driver of economic growth, while conversely, large and cumbersome government stifles communities. Putting this into context for our local council, it is my view that we need to find the savings and cap the rates. And from my analysis as an accountant, this can be done without reducing services to our community. Two, the proposed general rates rise of 1% on top of council's increased take of 2.18% due to the impact of increased valuations will result in an overall general rate rise of approximately 3.18%. In the context of our historical comparatively high level of general rates, an additional 3.18% will, in my opinion at least, serve to perpetuate the negative impact of our level of general rates on the growth of our region. Three, the proposed increase to the additional pedestal charge to be levied on small business operators, such as motels and caravan parks, I believe can be mitigated through further and closer examination. So I'd like to speak to these three issues in a bit more detail. Point number one, my views on the impact on the economy of smaller and efficient government, including local government, are well founded. As stated by the Fraser Institute in their publication, Measuring Government in the 21st Century, and I quote, studies have documented a negative empirical relationship between government size and economic growth rates. Beyond a certain size, it can actually begin to hinder economic growth, thereby lowering living standards for average citizens. Government is indeed very important and its programs are important to our quality of life. At the same time, these results demonstrate that more and larger government is not always associated with improved outcomes. There are certainly lessons to be learned in providing efficient government services from this vast array of international evidence. Governments would do well to seek examples of how to provide more and better services while reducing the cost to the tax-paying public. Now, on this point, I've always said that job security for our staff is sacred to me. I was brought up in a council family. My dad was a council worker. However, I believe that this council can deliver more and better services, assure job security for all of our staff, whilst reducing the cost to our ratepayers. And the following opportunities, as I recently presented to council, are just a few examples of how this can be done. By investing government grants in building renewals, we can reduce the current $500,000 we spend every year in maintaining council buildings. By working smarter in the way in which we deliver NRM services in controlling weeds, we can reduce the current cost of $462,000 per annum whilst improving our weed spraying program for our farmers. By being smarter with our human resourcing and investing in our internal staff, we can reduce the thousands of dollars we spend on consultants whilst providing our staff with opportunities to grow and develop. For example, we are paying an outside consultant / contracting firm $405,000 per annum to provide one person for 40 hours per week, whereby one of our neighbouring fellow rural councils does this with a local employee for $120,000 per year. We have in excess of 100 utes and passenger vehicles, costing this council in the vicinity of $1.7 million in depreciation and running costs, and I look forward to the ongoing fleet review in addressing this. Point number two, we know from the reports we've received that the final year of property valuation averaging in this budget is going to impact mostly on our local farmers. Now, as you shared with us in a recent budget meeting, Councillor Henson, yes, we know that farmers are doing well with cattle prices and they're at an all-time high. However, there are two things that we know about farming. One, there is no guarantee when it comes to rain, and two, commodity prices invariably go down as quickly as they go up. Furthermore, many of our farmers' summer crops have either failed or produced poor yields due to lack of follow-up rain. And as you said, Councillor Henson, at the same time, in speaking in favour of a rate rise, indicated that farmers you have spoken with are expecting and will accept some form of rate rise. This is a notion with which I have real concerns. This is not to mention the impact of a general rate increase on our high population of pensioners and low-income earners. We already have a high level of general rates in comparison to neighbouring councils, with rural-based communities like ours. I would like to share the following as an example. Now, my personal property has an unimproved valuation in Kingaroy. It's a residential property of $74,333. Now, based on the current year's rate in the dollar for Kingaroy, so that's the 2021 rate in the dollar, 2.4 per $100 or 2.4%. Along with my pensioner neighbours that live in my street, I pay a total of $4,004 per year in rates and levies for all services provided. Of that, I pay $1,784 in general rates alone. If my property was in the Nango and valued at that $74,000, at their rate of 3.11, I would pay $2,315. If I was in Mergen at 3.86, I would pay $2,869 in general rates, plus my, of course, normal sewerage, water and waste costs. And I do look forward to this council working through over the next 12 months any possible solutions that we can come up with in relation to try and get greater consistency across our categories throughout our communities. However, if my property was in the following towns at the same value, I would pay the following. So I pay $1,784 at the moment. If my town was in Gympie, where the rate in the dollar was 1.15, I would pay $1,241. $629 less than Kingaroy, $1,160 less than the Nango, and $1,714 less than Mergen. Sorry, $1,543 less than Kingaroy, $1,074 less than the Nango, and $1,628 less than Mergen. If my property was in Warwick or Stanthorpe, where the rate in the dollar was 1.48, I would pay $1,155, $629 less than Kingaroy, $1,160 less than Anango, and $1,714 less than Mergen. Now, I say that with the full understanding that it's very hard to make comparisons, so I've tried to choose two councils, Southern Downs and Gympie, that I believe are as close as possible to our circumstances. Now, this is, of course, on top of the proposed increases to our water and waste service charges, which I have supported and will continue to support because they are necessary to maintain our water network and our waste services across the region. With this in mind, it is my view that the right thing to do is to find the savings and cap the general rates. Limiting the additional take to the 2.18% is achievable without reducing services to our communities, and in my view is the financially responsible and economically sound thing to do. Point number 3, the proposed increase of the additional pedestal charge from $207 to $229, from 28 to 31 of the first charge in year 1 and $229 to $251 in year 2 is certainly much less than that which we contemplated early in the discussion. And it is an increase of $22 per year per additional pedestal. This means that for a caravan park that has, say, 60 pedestals, the annual cost will go from $12,420 in year to $13,740 in year 1 and to $15,060 in year 2. Now, I have supported the notion of bringing our second pedestal charges, particularly for high network impactors, such as some of our government organisations, into line with that of other councils. However, in light of the recent opportunities for savings, as previously shared and as we've all found together, working together, I believe now we have the opportunity to do further work on this over the next 12 months before imposing such on our business sector, particularly our local motels and caravan parks. Gympie Regional Council has a unit-based system whereby government and semi-government organisations as high-level impactors pay a higher second pedestal charge than do church-owned properties such as the smaller private schools. and commercial businesses, including caravan parks and motels. This council, Gympie Council, has not applied the one-size-fits-all on additional pedestals, and I believe that we should review their system with a view to implementing any proposed additional pedestal charges after 1 July 2022. My final additional point that I'd like to make is that to raise concern over the inclusion of the $11.8 million in the borrowing schedule for council in the 22-23 to the 24-25 years to complete the spillway upgrade at Gordon Brook Dam in accordance with state regulations. It is my view that adding a further almost $12 million in debt to what is currently $33 million is not affordable for our small regional council and will place more cash flow burden on our rural communities. As such, I feel strongly that we should adopt a similar position to that of other councils in advocating to government for the complete funding of such regulated infrastructure. Thank you. Anyone else? Further comments? Councillor Shoemaker, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your comments. Certainly, I think much of what you've discussed has been discussed through our committee meetings. Absolutely, and we all recognise the challenge in setting rates and gaining enough revenue to actually run an efficient council operation. I certainly think a lot of what you've identified are areas in which this council is focused on at taking a deeper dive, and this budget process has certainly revealed the need to do that. I guess I probably want to confirm, so because I appreciate the comments that you've made, are you proposing, what are you proposing we actually do that would see you support this budget is probably what I'm really trying to understand here, because we've had so many conversations around a number of the points that you've raised, absolutely. And, you know, the consultant charges, we've been through line by line, every general ledger for consultants. We know that comes back to a lot of our challenge around getting qualified staff here in the South Burnett to deliver those services. And, you know, we've leaned in, we've cut a lot of consultant costs where we can. I know in terms of NRM, we've had similar discussions around public conveniences and how we can make more savings, and we've all recognise there's much more work to be done, and there's funding opportunities that this council will be relentless in advocating for. I'm probably confused by some of your comments, because certainly you have mentioned time and time again around reducing the deficit for council and finding a way to take us out of deficit. I don't disagree. I certainly recognise it's a challenge, and one of the ways in which we have to consider taking ourselves out of deficit is raising revenue, which is not ideal. Certainly recognise the impacts, and I have raised in this chamber the impacts to our economy. So I'm probably really keen, Mr. Mayor, to understand, because much of what you've raised, we've had these conversations, and this is, in my view, the best that we've been able to achieve, but it's by no means done. So I would like to understand, what is it that you're asking this council to change that would see you support this budget?
Ms. Councillor Shoemaker, it's a really good question, because it is no doubt what we'd all like to see clarified. We have had many conversations, and the statements that I've made here are consistent with what I said in previous discussions in the last budget committee meeting, that I voted against the additional 1%. I voted against the additional pedestal charge, and I believe that we can find our way out of deficit without putting our hands any further into the pockets of our ratepayers, particularly when you start to compare our general rate with that of some other councils. So I suppose, to answer your question, I would like to see this council pursue a strategy of cost savings as a major factor in our pathway out of deficit, as against focusing on revenue raising, where I do believe that our general rates are at a level that are not sustainable for our small business community, for our farmers, for our and for our pensioners if we continue to increase them. So to answer your question, what would cause me to support this budget? Number one, a 0% rate rise. Council's preparedness to just accept the 2.18% that we're getting from the valuation increase. Number two, that the additional pedestal charge be set aside for further work to be undertaken with a view to implement such on the 1st of July 2022, and consideration be given to having discussions with the Gympie Regional Council into their model in relation to second pedestal charges. And number three, to remove the $11.8 million in proposed borrowings between 22-23 and 24-25 for the Gordon Brook Spillway, as a number of other councils that I spoke to at the National Conference have decided to do, as it is their view that the government should be funding it, that councils shouldn't have to be borrowing money and burdening their ratepayers to fix what many councils see should be, to a large extent, a government responsibility. So in summary, three things. I will support a 0%. I'm happy with the 2.18% increase in our take on general rates. I would like to see us set the pedestal charges aside and leave them as they are for a further review to be done for 1 July. And I would like to see us give serious consideration to removing the $11.8 million in borrowings for the Gordon Brook Spillway, because I believe that the government should come to the party on that. We won't get one extra drop of water out of it, but we're going to have to pay off something that isn't our fault. So I hope that clarifies my position. If those three things were to be addressed, I would happily support this budget. Yep. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, when you go and talk to the other councils, and you go down to, like we did to the National General Assembly, and you start to talk to CEOs and other councils about what the cuts and things that they're doing, I think I agree with the Mayor, there's a lot more that we can do. But the other thing that frustrated me was that the Mayor worked with the finance staff, and he came up with, it was $1.3 million worth of savings, and presented it to us, and we went through it, and I've actually got the document. So we went through and we only agreed to 535,343 of that, of the savings. So that's the kind of stuff where we could, like, that's big money. The other thing that frustrates me is that when we say we're putting the rates up by 1%, we're actually not. We're actually putting them up by 3.18%, because with the valuations levelled, the averaging, we're actually collecting that in any case. So, and apparently I've actually talked to our rates manager, and the same happened last year. So even though we appeared to be having a zero rate rise, we were actually collecting 2.18% last year as well, on top of our general rate. So sorry? 2.1.
The 0% rate rise, councillors, and we're quite, and that's, sorry, I'm not trying very hard not to get involved in this debate, but I would go and grab it, but the total take last year, and it was explained to council at the time, 0% would still mean there would be a change in total take. Now, my recollection of it was about 1.79 of the general at a 0% rise. It's not that we're putting up rates by that amount, that's the total take, the total change, and the total collected. The change is in the cent and the dollar, which is the 1%, so it's just the facts. The 3.18 will be the change in the total take over the rates from what was collected last year to what's collected this year. Help me, before discount or after discount? Before discount. So then discount gets applied to that and to your concession. So, but last year that was explained to council very clearly that there would be movements in there, and it wasn't the 2.18 that we put them up.
Okay. So, to Mr. Mayor, yes. So in any case, we are getting that percentage over and above because it's always been the percentage on the total take. So we're getting more in any case, but also when you look at the comparisons of rates across other regions, like we've had property in Western Downs, and our rural rates are just crazily, like where we've got the property in Western Downs, it's way cheaper than the South Bernard. So, and I've had real estate agents say that that please don't put the rates up because it's just, we can't, you know, it's just people are can't pay anymore. So, and pensioners and everybody. So our rates are way up there, and we've even had the we've had consultants come in and tell us that we're right up there with our ratepayers can't keep footing the bill. We have to start to make some cost savings and some cuts. So I'm really keen to support the mayor. He's an accountant to try and do more than what we've done with this. And when he comes forward with some ideas about how we could make these $1.3 million savings, I think we need to be more, this council team needs to look more closely at that and not just go, oh, well, no, we won't, no, that's not, no, when there's opportunities, and we need to be bold. This council, we need to change and to do things differently because our rates are high. We've got all sorts of issues in our region. We've actually got, and on the back of the highest rate of suicide across, pretty much in the whole of Australia. So we've got issues. So we need to make changes. We need to start to think about our farmers. We need to think about our rates. We need to really prosecute this. And so I'm keen to, as has been suggested, to really, really look at different ways of doing things and trying to get better outcomes for our community going forward. Because I think that we have a fantastic region, but at some point we need to say, well, somewhere along the line, we can't just keep putting our rates up higher and higher and higher. We've got rural people. We actually had them, particularly out in that Iron Pot area, they were just, they were so angry with the rate rise. They were so angry last time. And so I think that on the back of COVID, we were able to hold them. And if we could, I think we need to hold them and try and find the savings. So if there's an opportunity to find savings, that's what I'd like to see. So, and I think that the mayor did put some opportunities forward, but we just went no. So I'm keen to look at doing this differently, and to flag the fact that I'm also challenged by the rate rise and the lack of support for some of the savings that have already been flagged. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, Councillor Duff, say that when the Mayor put $1.3 billion worth of savings forward, it sounds like he just wanted us to tick and flick them. There was an option put there, and I appreciate the work that the Mayor's done, but as Councillor Shoemaker said, we made, and you just acknowledged, we made over $500,000 worth of savings. Me personally, with this budget that we've got here in front of us, a draft budget, I'm struggling to convince myself that we're going to deliver the service level that these people in our community are going to expect and have expected, even with what we've got now. And you're trying to get more savings and to make more cuts. I struggle with that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr CEO, but the 2.8 and the 3.18 that we're getting hung up on here with the 1% rate rise, the 2.8 and with the collect, that's in reference to the averaging that was implemented 3 years ago. So we've carried, as a council, have we not carried that rates up until now, technically, without a better explanation? You'll be able to explain it better than me, and then I can ask some more questions. Can I have a...
Mayor, do you want me to? Yeah. If we hadn't averaged and capped, the full impact of the valuations would have been in year one, so it would have jumped. So if my property was revalued from 500,000 to $1 million, the full impact would have been in year one. By the averaging and the capping, if it went over 30%, it's been spread. So it's been spread effectively 33, 33, 33 over the 3 years. So it's been a third, a third, a third. So if that makes, that's the best way I can describe it. Rather than full impact in year one, it's washed out over 3 years.
So would it be a fair comment then saying that the council has had to find, because of the spread of the 3-year payments on the initial revaluation and the initial impact on the ratepayers, we've had to sort of find money through those other 2 years up until now. We're just sort of catching up. Am I wrong in saying that? Not so much in catching up, but we haven't had that money available to us? Is that?
Council by averaging takes the decision not to levy those rates in those years. It spreads it because, and the reason that you average is that the fluctuation and the valuations can be so wild, it just smooths it out. Yeah.
Yeah, so look, as far as the 1.3 million that the Mayor has put up, and as I said, I acknowledge the work that he's done and I appreciate the fact that he's an accountant. But we as a group of councillors worked our way through that, as Councillor Shoemaker has alluded to. And I feel very comfortable with the efforts that we made to save $500,000. I think we were pretty savage. And like I said, I'll be speaking to this budget. I'll support the budget, but I'll also say that we're going to have to work very hard, and the staff are going to have to work very diligently to produce the level of service that the people out there expect on this budget that we're producing now. The pedestal charges, we've been talking about that. We brought that back to the council for I don't know how many times, and the charge was led by the Mayor, as he acknowledged. So we get to the point now, and I understand, I'm not saying that I'm not interested in having conversations around that or maybe working out a different way that we implement it using other councils. I also want to point out that the Mayor acknowledged that it's hard to compare with other councils. We're a different box of oranges to any other council around us. And yes, we can use it as guide, and we always do, but I struggle with trying to compare, and I understand, and I've done it myself in the past, but when it comes to the South Burnett, we're our own identity, and we have our own separate issues compared to any other council that's around us. Certainly happy to use them as guidance and all the rest of it, but yeah, I was trying not to say too much, but when you made reference to the 1.3 and we didn't do enough there to save it, and yeah, that sort of brought me to the. I'll also, while I'm up and having a chance to have a chat, I'll also be open. I can't find it in the budget, but I'll be having further discussions around the Mergen Library staff member that we're looking at implementing, whether it's a need or a want, or whether so that's just little small things around there that I'll also be looking at. I just want to put that out there. But I'm comfortable, happy to have conversations around them pedestal charges if we want. I'm happy to leave it at the way it is. I'll support this budget as it is, as it stands. So,
Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just done a bit of a quick recap. I know you quoted Gympie. I think it's important to acknowledge that Gympie has a population of 52,935 people, and we have a population of 32,500 people. So there is quite an enormous difference there. I'd also like to acknowledge that the recent media announcement, Somerset Regional Council has increased their rates. They do have a population of 25,887, so certainly your comparison there is probably legitimate. However, they don't pay for water. Their rates have increased 1.5%. Western Downs Regional Council rates have increased 4.5%. Toowoomba Regional Council rates have increased 2.5%, and Gympie Regional Council rates have increased 3%. I also want to acknowledge Councillor Duff. Yes, the Mayor did bring forward savings. Through this chamber, since April, we have discussed savings. The Mayor wasn't the only person to identify savings. And throughout those conversations, we have clawed back dollars every single meeting. And it's been tracked through our meetings. There have been times there's been 400,000 here, 500,000 there. And every dollar, regardless of the amount, has been considered. Every single one. And there were I think this council was very open to the ideas the Mayor put forward. We asked the Mayor to put his ideas on the table, to move a motion, to put them up, to put them for consideration. And every one of those ideas were considered with advice and guidance from our staff around what was actually achievable. Because at the end of the day, that is what I'm very mindful of. Once we decide this budget, we have to be able to, the doors have to stay open. I've had the conversation, I've raised it in this chamber with each and every one of you. In terms of cost savings, well, we have to consider service delivery. And by all means, we have an enormous number of waste transfer facilities across our region. We have an enormous number of libraries, pools, waste management facilities, wastewater facilities. Our operations are complex. I've learned that through this budget process. Absolutely agree with you. There is more work to be done. But I'd like to acknowledge in the fourth quarter review today, our staff, everyone is on the bus here. Everyone is standing together and we're doing our very best. And I'd like to acknowledge the team. This year, they have clawed $1.353 million from the fourth quarter review, which has brought our deficit down to $3.207 million. That's exceptional, considering we were tracking at 4.5 million. Wow. We're already starting the year ahead. In terms of the 0% rate rise, Mr. Mayor, you know, I was just at the National Assembly last month. I've talked to a number of mayors and councils around what they're doing. And there's a strong position. We sat here with QTC, who actually said a 0% rate rise is irresponsible. And I fully supported it last year because it was our only way to give some COVID stimulus or injection. But I recognise CPI is at 1.1%. I think the 1% is fair. Look, I recognise the increase in valuations, and by all means, we could look at that. I'm probably torn because you've talked a lot about deficits and taking this council out of deficit. So if we take that 1% from our bottom line, and if we take that additional pedestal charge, I'd like to understand the impact that would have to our deficit and exactly what you're proposing there, Mr. Mayor, because you've said, you've made a political promise that you'll take this council out of deficit. In terms of removing the $11.8 million borrowings, we've talked about to the nth degree this council's appetite. We will. That borrowings is a last resort by all means, but we have an extensive water program to fund over the next 10 years. $115 million over the next 20 years, $90-odd million in the first 10 years. And this council's staring down the barrel of that and saying, how do we fix this problem? Because Kingaroy and the South Burnett cannot grow if we do not have sustainable trunk infrastructure, and that takes investment. So whilst I understand your concern about highlighting that, I think it's responsible to do that in the effort that we don't get the funding. And may we please get the funding, because I don't disagree with you. That is a state government requirement that we're trying to meet there, and that puts enormous pressure on our ratepayers. I'd just like to acknowledge in closing that I've really enjoyed working with our team through this process. And I think as a team, regardless, we need to be able to stand united in taking our region forward. And I am really concerned, considering all the work that's been done, all of the conversations that we've had, and the reality that we're all signing up to continue this work. It doesn't stop here. I'm very concerned about some of the comments you've made today, Mr. Mayor. And to be quite frank, I'm quite disappointed at the end of this process that this is where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. It would be nice if you would share with the chamber your concerns about my comments. My comments are factual, I can assure you. And in some of the comments that you made there, 1.1%, yes, is the CPI. Our total take will be close to 2.2, which will be double the CPI, our total take on general rates. So we will, in fact, achieve more than that. The 1% isn't the total take increase. It's 3.18%. In addition to that, in terms of political promises to take this council out of deficit by 2024, that can't happen without the support of this council. And I've always said that it would be done through finding savings. I have never said that I was signing up to increase revenue. And when you say that I've brought these things to the table now, and you're concerned about that, I've raised these issues consistently. I raised them at the last budget committee meeting. I said then, and I didn't vote for the rate rise. I didn't vote for the pedestal increase because, as I indicated then, I think there are further savings to be made. And when we've found all the savings that we can possibly make, then I'm happy to consider increasing the revenue. But until we find all the possible savings, I'm not prepared to sign up to increasing rates and increasing the burden on our community. And look, as for QTC saying that 0% is irresponsible, you might recall that I did clarify with QTC that 0% is not irresponsible when you still have savings to find. So that needed to be put in context. And I made it clear to the QT's fellow sitting beside me that that isn't necessarily the case when there are future savings to be made. And if you go back and look at the video, that's exactly what I said. The other thing I just wanted to clarify there is that, as I said, I'm prepared to support the budget, but I've made it clear as to the same concerns that I made clear at the last Budget Committee meeting, that I don't believe that the extra rates burden, and, you know, when we talk about the fact that other councils, Councillor, are putting up their rates by 1.5% or 3.53%, and yes, they are neighbouring councils, but remember, they're coming off a much lower base than we are. So, as I said in my presentation, if you look at what I pay, I will pay this next year $1,840 in general rates. Now, if I was in Gympie, well, in the current year, I pay $1,784. If I was in Gympie, that would be $1,241. If I was in Stanthorpe or Warwick, that would be $1,155. My point is simply that there has been a lot of increases to our general rates over previous terms of council, and we are coming off a high base. And all I'm trying to do is allow that to level out over time so that we don't become a relatively highly rated council compared to other regions, and then give our region the best opportunity of growing by making sure that we can, wherever possible, keep the rates down by finding savings. Councillor Henshin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a rule, put my rule hat on, my council hat off for a brief moment. Councillor Duff, you did get a lot of opposition from that area out there and the rest of the South Burner. And in all due respect, you're a councillor for 17 years, and the reason why was because nothing was happening. Nothing was happening out there. And as Councillor Jones alluded to several years ago, it's a work in progress. It takes years. We're starting to see the results of that from the work behind the scenes of these people that work for the South Burnett Regional Council. Let me tell you, the primary producers out there are seriously impressed with what's happened in the last 2 and 3 years. The reason they were seriously disgruntled, and I was one, I was at those meetings in Cumbria in the Iron Pot Hall that threw rocks on the table. It's laughed about today, and I'm happy to stand here today and admit that. There's been a huge improvement in there. But the reason why was because nothing was happening. There's been a great change in that in the last couple of years, let me tell you. And the primary producers out there, a majority of them are sick and tired of hearing the South Burnett Council being compared to Western Downs or Somerset or the Darling Downs. Totally different. It's great to take on board what they're doing and how they're doing it for sure, as Councillor Schumacher has alluded to, and the facts and figures that come out of there. We don't have gas fields, we don't have coal fields, we don't have population, we don't have the climate they have, we don't have water. So the primary producers out there, let me tell you, are sick to death of hearing what the neighbouring councils are doing. How about we control what we're doing within the South Burnett region and take on board what's happening next door, and we can certainly learn by that. People have this perception of how it's cheaper here, it's cheaper there. They choose to live in the South Burnett for a reason. If it's not the rates, it's their lifestyle and what we have to offer here. Perhaps if that's not good enough, they perhaps should shift to some of those neighbouring councils. So I will go to bat for the primary producers out there because I am one of them. Our primary production and our cattle industry has seen something unprecedented, and that's going to continue, I'm led to believe. I'm also an agricultural farmer. I know very well commodity prices, as our mayor has alluded to. They go. I'm not sure whether people are aware, when cattle prices are high, commodity prices are low. When commodity prices are high, cattle prices come down. That's how the system works. And throw in the weather and the climate with that, and our primary producers have learned to live and become seriously efficient around that. They expect their council to do the same thing. With the team that we have and the work that's been done, and General Manager Jarvis has alluded to in some 25 years, you haven't had a review quite like what we've done at the moment. I think it's a work in progress that anybody in this room can put that red line through anything they like. Anything they like, they can put a red line through it. I said 12 months ago at the budget talks where we were thrown in the deep end, and ghosts weren't we thrown in the deep end as a new council? I said, I'll make a quote, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was serious concerns where this council were going to be in 4 years' time. And we've got to be sustainable for the people of the South Burnett and our ratepayers. I think it's a sensible, reasonable approach. The work that's gone into this budget, everybody would love to see a 0% rate rise, but let's be a little bit realistic. Our CPI is at 1.1%. Is there any commodity that anyone has gone out in the last 12 months and purchased that hasn't gone up? Or any service that's been available to us that hasn't gone up? So I'm supportive of this budget. I take on board everything that's been said, and I appreciate the Mayor, the work that you do behind the scenes as well as in the front line. Councillor Shoemaker, appreciate your comments as well, and Councillor Jones and Councillor Duff. I take that all on board, and I take anything on the chin. I'm proud of this budget. There's a lot of people not going to agree with it. I think it's a work in progress that we can start. This is a great starting point. Last year we didn't know where we were going, let's be honest. We didn't know where we were going or what we were doing. We had a great team behind us, and look what they've done this year. They've cut and shredded, they've come up with facts and figures. We've worked tirelessly, they have, weeks and weeks and weeks over this. We've sat here in chambers and tossed this backwards and forwards. So I'm comfortable with where we sit with this budget, and I really look forward to the next couple of years. And the Mayor, being qualified as you are, I appreciate the work you do and your qualifications, with all due respect, but I really do believe that it's a work in progress that I look forward to over the next 2 years, that's for sure. That's where we can put this council. Not on the back of our neighbouring councils and what they're doing or anything else. We've got to take the ball and run with it. So with that, I fully support this draft budget. I also acknowledge that in time, I think we can still do some great work behind the scenes with what we've got to work with. So thank you.
Any further discussion before we get the resolution on the table? Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just asked the question before. I'm not sure whether you can tell me. If we went to a 0% rate rise, what that 1% actually raises in revenue, and also in terms of what that additional pedestal.
I think on the 0% from memory it was about 2.16. The additional pedestal, look, I'd have to go back and look at my notes. I thought it was about 40,000, but I'd have to go back and double check that number. Probably the most significant one would be the model with the borrowings not in it. We would have to significantly reduce the capex because it would be, you'd be running deficits for the whole 10 years, I would imagine.
So we would have to, just to confirm what you mean by that, so if we took the 11.8 million out of our borrowings and out of our forward schedule.
Yeah, you couldn't afford your capital program. Your capital program would have to drop by, which that particular project can't drop. So you'd have to drop that amount of money out of your program based on the current rates. Yep.
So that would risk other key infrastructure upgrade or requirements, renewals. Yep. So that's not really an option. And so the 0%,
you would just be adding to your deficit. So instead of being a 3.2 mil deficit, you would be adding on, what was it, 500,000 or 600,000 on top of that.
500,000 or 600,000. So that'd take us to about $3.7 million deficit. Okay. And then in terms of the Mayor's challenge around additional savings, I really can't see that being an option for this at this current, like in the final hours of our budget. I'd like to understand how there's really not very little opportunity to pull more savings out of here, Mr. Mayor. I think we've I know I've seen it on every one of our staff members. I know I've had general managers almost in tears. Well, not general managers, definitely, poor Pete. So I'm pretty confident there's not much more you could claw out of there at this point in time, unless it was actually taking drastic measures with service delivery, which I've never ruled out. So if we, if we accept these budget papers, I don't know, the 0% rate rise, something we could consider, but it's certainly going to knock that deficit around, Mr. Mayor. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, can I clarify it? It's not 500,000, it's 280,000. 0% rate rise after discount is 280,000, Selena, not 500,000. I have the figures here in front of me. I've done the calculations with our rates officer. And the second pedestal is 124,000, not 40,000. So I could just confirm that. It's not 500,000, it's 280. What I'm suggesting is that before we bowl in and add on an extra 1% on top of the on top of the take, it's not the rate rise, it's a take. It's the total take goes up by 2.18. Okay, so we get an extra 2.18 in revenue as a result of revaluations. The rate rise is 1%. So the total take is roughly 3.18% increased. The extra 1% gives us about 280,000 after discount. Now, if what I'm suggesting is that rather than jump in now, we only get one chance at this to do the rates because we can only do rates at the start of the year, at the budget committee meeting. Rather than jump in and go to our community and say we want an extra 1% on the rates and we're going to put the pedestal charges in place, that we're not in a position to make further savings right now. But that as the first and second quarter budget reviews are done, I'm really keen for us to explore the discussions we have at the last budget committee meeting around things like biosecurity and pest and weed control. And I know Councillor Henshin and Councillor Duff have had meetings with people in the field as to how we could potentially do it better at less cost. And we talked about General Manager O'May doing a review of that. That could result in savings. Doing a fleet review over the next 3 months to have a look at the utilisation of our white fleet, and then be in a position perhaps in the first or second quarter to be able to then again find further savings from that. To have a look at our human resourcing strategy and say, well, if we've got a $400,000 consultant in a particular area, can we actually put someone on for $120,000? And I know it's challenging, I know it's hard to get people, but a rural council not far from us has done exactly that. Okay, so that's $280,000. And I know it's not all OPEX. I know that 55% of it's CapEx. But we've got a lot of work to do yet on this budget. It's a moving feast. We've got first quarter review and second quarter review. And I do believe that we're going to find more savings as we work through our asset management plans, as we work through some of these issues around consultants and converting them to staff, as we work through our white fleet, as we work through the issues in relation to our biosecurity services and how we deliver them, as we work through what we're doing at the Coolanbunya sale yards. And I believe that we can find that extra 200,000-300,000 through savings without putting that on our community right now. If we had a chance to redo the rates in 3 months' time, I'd be happy just to say, yeah, let's do this now and we can always tweak it back in 3 months' time. But we don't get that opportunity. So I don't want to lock in for 12 months on a rate rise when I know that we've still got more work to do and find more savings. And that's all I'm saying at this point in time. And I'm confident that with the reviews that we've talked about, that we can find more savings that aren't going to impact on services. And the things I've just mentioned don't impact on services. If taking white fleet away is going to mean that our Parks and Gardens guys can't do their jobs or our fellas can't get out to their graders, don't take them away. They need them to do their jobs. But if we have excess, let's find them and let's work more efficiently. We may not, we may, but I do believe we can find enough in the first or second quarter review to mitigate the rates, find the savings and cap the general rates, because I'm really concerned that our general rates, compared to every council I've looked at, bar Townsville, every council, we are certainly at the top end in terms of our general rate. We're not in terms of our utilities, but we certainly are in terms of our general rate. That's really, I suppose, the argument I'm putting forward today. Yeah.
So I just want to confirm, we have already significantly cut the white fleet and we have challenged the staff to cut more white fleet. So that is already an active project. So I agree with you, those savings will be realised over the first and second quarter, absolutely. And I know everyone's on the same page with that, absolutely. We've moved that and I know the team are working hard. I just want to confirm, so if we go for a 0% rate rise and we remove the additional pedestal, that's $404,000 off the balance sheet, plus you're proposing another 200,000? Or I just want to confirm, what are you proposing in savings?
Proposing that we can find those savings.
So proposing we'll find another $404,000
I
worth of
absolutely
savings.
believe so, without compromising services. That's only just my personal view. And what I've looked at, I believe there is opportunities to do that. And I've
And-
given some examples today of how.
So your examples were NRM and investing in staff instead of using consultants. Have I got that right?
Yeah, so I'll just quickly go through those examples again. By investing government grants in building renewals, so we can reduce the current $500,000 we spend on maintaining council buildings. I know we've had we've had this discussion with our manager of buildings, and she was quite favourable to that. By working smarter in NRM, the 462,000, I know there is a view that we can perhaps do that for less cost without compromising our weed spraying service. By looking at converting some of those consultant positions, and that might take 6 months. But I mean, if we convert a $400,000 spend to a $120,000 spend, well, okay, we save $280,000. 6 months, we might save $140,000. And in addition to that, continuing to get that feedback information coming through from the fleet review to say, okay, well, is there more scope to find further savings in White Fleet? There may not be. They may well be. But I know that one of the things that General Manager is doing over the next 3 months is monitoring the utilisation of the fleet with the plant guys. And if we're finding that there is White Fleet that isn't being utilised, then we actually start to drill down and have a good look at why that is. And there might be some further savings there. But I do believe we can find the extra 400,000. But, you know, I'm very prepared and still support looking at the second pedestals. But when I looked at what Gympie's doing, it did raise my eyebrows. That, for me, there are some big impactors in our region who don't pay rates and don't pay much at all for their second pedestals. And I believe that those big impactors, who are primarily probably government agencies, should be paying their fair share. And I would like to have another look at that rather than spread the one size fits all to everybody. Yeah, because that's what Gympie's doing. Yeah.
I just
And
want
it may not be right for us, but that would be the answer. Yeah.
So a couple of things I want to confirm. Certainly in terms of government grants, we've looked at those Works for Queensland grants, and we've absolutely looked at how we can squeeze those existing funding programs so that we're not spending our capital. That's my understanding. It's also my understanding we've made that commitment to White Fleet, so that is happening. So I agree with you, that will be found. In terms of the pedestals, am I correct in noting that we received legal advice about those options and that wasn't something that we could actually do in the first instance, was single out particular users? Because I think we're all on the page with that. I don't think anyone in this room will argue with that. There are users who have significant impact on our network.
Yeah, Councillor, that there was advice back, but that was one of the things that needs to be further looked at and unpacked. It really is to see where that goes and how that's done. And I would suspect, Mayor, in any which case, this is going to be picked up over the 12 months as the full review. So that second pedestal and what we can't. There's a couple of logical things that you could probably roll straight out, but you just got to make sure that they're lawful. So we've got to do some more work in that space.
And sorry, Councillor, I guess just on that, if I can, is that I suppose I'm keen to investigate what Gympie have done, because they've got different categories of second pedestal charges for different organisations. Maybe it's based on network impact, I don't know, but I'm keen to see what legal framework, what legal work they've done to understand how they did that, what works, is it legal, can we do a similar thing, and then try and say, well, we'll charge the bigger impactors more, we'll charge the smaller impactors less. I'm just keen to see us put more science around that and do more investigation.
Well, we've certainly had those conversations, and hearing CEO Mark, we're not in a position to do that at this point in time. So if we don't, noting we have ageing infrastructure, so if we don't make any change to our additional second pedestal charge, hearing what you're saying and the reality that we can only set rates once a year, that would mean that we would have to wait, we would be a whole year behind if we were to park that and not do anything with additional pedestals until next year. Is that what you're proposing? We just sit on it? So do nothing, take that out. Okay. Well, I understand your position. I'm not sure it's achievable, but I'll consider it.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Schumacher. Just General Manager Obey, I know in the Works for Queensland budget, you sent us an email that indicated that we were going to allocate $200,000 to building renewals and that would result in savings to the current $500,000 building maintenance, but you had all zeros. Peter, is there a figure there that we're going to save in building maintenance this year because of what we're spending on Works for Queensland building maintenance?
Yeah,
Do we
yeah,
know where that'll sort of land? Any rough estimates at this stage?
Yeah, so we've actually allocated $100,000 or $200,000, $100,000 this year and next year for Works for Queensland to do the building maintenance, and we reduced the operational building maintenance by a corresponding $100,000 each year. So we've said we can identify projects over the year that will be operational maintenance that we'll do under the grant funding rather than operational. So we reduced it by the full 100,000 each year.
Well done, because that's exactly the sort of smart strategies that we need. You know, use external funding to do that. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, just one final point. I know you've targeted the consultants, and I think it's the consultants' main use is around the design and engineering through infrastructure and all that sort of stuff. Aaron, a question to you, and you referred, Mr Mayor, that Gympie use a internal staff member for $120,000 a year. First question is, do we have anybody that has the qualifications to do that position internally? And if not, the people that we are trying to train up, do they need the qualifications of a consultant to be able to achieve that level of recognition, I guess, for to become an engineer to do that job?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. So council has 3 RPEQs. It's myself, Kevin Searle and James Darcy on staff. So the consultants we hold, and we hold consultants in different areas, which is OPEX and capital. The money that we pay for those positions is split across OPEX and in capital, so it's not just straight up OPEX saving. Essentially, with the higher rate, you'll do reduced capital. So if you were to recruit somebody, we would see a saving generally in the operational space, which would be, it's a significant saving, but not a huge amount because we already budget for that position internally anyway. Fair to say we are currently recruiting for that position at the moment. If that was to change, then we'd obviously adjust the budget through that. If we were to recruit somebody, I think the saving for that would be probably in the order of 80 grand for council's bottom line to its OPEX, and then there'd be an offset of capital, which would increase capital. We're probably just doing a little bit less capital to try and absorb that cost. So that's probably the fair analysis of where that would come out. So yeah, we require that position to operate by law. I think I've covered that with council previously, so we would recommend that position remain. Hopeful that we would try and recruit somebody over the short term, and we can bring that back through. That'll be one of your pluses and minuses if we have a win in that space. Is probably where I think it'll be. It could be 80 grand, but it won't. Yeah, it won't be the full amount saved to your OPEX. It'll be a CapEx amount as well. You might say, okay, well, that'll offset by depreciation. Well, it probably won't. It'll just be that we're doing less capital to try and absorb that because we still have the funded amount of depreciation to use. So, but if we were to get someone in that position, it would be one that we would return through a plus and minus because, as we all know, things at quarterly reviews do change in the OPEX space. So it's nice to have a little bit of something there. Does that answer your question, Council?
Yeah, General Manager, like in this particular space, to try and recruit somebody into that position is getting more and more difficult, and we're probably more aware of it than most because we've been trying to fill that position for quite a considerable amount of time. And you see on TV and that all the time that one of the most sought after people is engineers or design engineers right across the whole private sector and all that sort of stuff. And the private sector is paying well and truly above what the local government wage would be. So I struggle to convince myself that we will be successful. I hope I'm very wrong. I stand here and I'm happy to be corrected, but I do believe that we will struggle to fill that position in the current environment with good people going to the private sector for huge money.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones. I suppose just on that, look, I didn't disclose which department it was. I wanted to keep that fairly quiet, but so apologies, but it wasn't Gympie Council. It was another council where their community is smaller than ours. They are a rural council, and they have an RPEQ senior planning engineer of design who oversees their works and signs off on it, that I won't say where it is because I don't want to disclose the person, but that's costing them 120,000. That's the package. And I do know I have family members who are civil engineers. I would suggest to you that perhaps private sector rates aren't much higher than what you're indicating our rates are. I could be wrong, but I can compare to private sector rates, and I think our award is reasonably on par from what I've been able to determine. But if that small community can recruit someone, I would be hopeful. We have another go that we might be able to. Again, as you say, no guarantees, but there's a possibility there that we could save 80,000 in OPEX and another 100,000 possibly in CAPEX if we can fund that internally.
Thanks for responding. And like I say, just for me, my last comment is I understand, I've taken all your comments, I've listened to them all. I appreciate them for what you are, and again, acknowledge the work that you've done behind the scenes. But at this stage, we've got 2 weeks to review this document, but yeah, I'm comfortable where we sit with the figures in front of me. So yeah, I'll certainly review over the next 2 weeks, but at this current moment, I'm supportive of this draft document in front of me.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Councillor Froloff.
Thank you, Mayor. We can argue over this all night, backwards and forth and backwards and forth. But I'd like to bring forward a resolution. I'm not going to comment on anything until I've read the whole thing, so we've got 2 weeks to do that. So I'd like to bring forward the resolution that we accept this information in the agenda for information. So can we do that?
Yes, just as per on the screen there, Ros.
Yes, as per on the screen. That the final draft operational capital budget 2021-2022 be received for information. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Froloff. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Potter, thank you. Any further comments before we get that resolved? Go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Similarly with the with the annual operational plan 6.2, the recommendation is that the final draft annual operational plan for 21-22 be received for information. Now, discussing with Mr. CEO, please clarify it's just for information. There will be opportunity. There is still opportunity for councillors to provide information and provide feedback. So it's not set in concrete. At this stage, a bit like the budget, we're just receiving it for information. So just want to clarify that. Would that be correct, Mr. CEO?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, so we've tried to pick up from the workshop that we had partly the other day, and then other feedback we've received. If councillors spot things in there that can come out or go forward, or anyway, yeah, please. The final agenda 14th, so the agenda will be published fully for the budget meeting, including the draft op plan on the Friday prior. So what would that be, about the 8th of July? So that'll be next Friday. So if we could have your feedback in, if there is any further feedback, or if there's any discussion or glaring bits and pieces you spot today, please let us know.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Okay, well, I'll move that we for the final draft annual operational plan 21-22 be received for information. Do we have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Jones. Any speakers? If not, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Mr. CEO, I think that's everything on the agenda. So we'll call the meeting to close at 3:38 p.m. Thank you all for your attendance, and have a wonderful rest of day. Thank you.